All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
That we had a great program earlier in the week. We did it live at AIM with the simulcast. I think we had about 140, 150 participants between live and simulcast. And during that program, we really dug into the details of Missouri's new Proposition A, which is Missouri's paid sick leave.
I would tell you, we scheduled an hour and a half and we went over 2 hours. Yeah.
Yes. We had a lot of questions we answered. It was a great program, and we were really trying to get people immersed in the new law so that they could be prepared to implement the new paid sick leave law next May.
I think you should just pat yourself on the back right now with the job that you did. There you go. Well done.
How about that? All right. So I did want to give an update to this, and just in the last 2 days, a lawsuit was filed in the Missouri that goes to the Missouri Supreme Court, challenging Missouri's minimum wage and paid sick leave law. The action was taken by 3 Missouri citizens and the Missouri Grocers Association, the Missouri Restaurant Association, the Associated Industries of Missouri, which is a different group than your AIM, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and the Missouri Forest Product Association, and the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. And in the 5-count verified petition, they allege Proposition A should be invalidated for 5 separate reasons. The first is that the fiscal note summary related to the minimum wage increase did not properly address or accurately address the cost to local government, private employers, and the state administrative costs to enforce the new law. This one's really interesting. The summary statement that appeared on the ballot did not disclose that the paid sick leave law use was capped, that the cap would vary by the size of the employer, that the law exempted some employers, that local governments were given oversight of the law, that only public higher education institutions are exempted, that the mandate allows paid sick leave use for non-health reasons, and that the mandate includes new criminal penalties for non-compliance. Remember, we talked about the misdemeanor for each violation when we talked about the law on Monday. The third reason is that Proposition A violates the Missouri Constitution. The fourth reason is it violates the Missouri Constitution in a second way. And then the fifth reason is that Proposition A violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So we will see this case again was filed directly with the Missouri Supreme Court, and we'll have to see how this one shakes out.
All right. So that's a lot. Now, this is a little bit new ground for me. Maybe it's everyday stuff for, a sharp guy like you, but a little bit of new territory for me. So what do I do, right? I'm just like your firm and Karen's businesses here in Eastern Missouri. And, the couple weeks from now, I'm adjusting pay rates. I'm dealing with wage compression, and we're going to have Mikey Mack on here again, talking a little bit about that here, I think, next week. And then we have administrative changes that are needing to take place as it relates to policy and handbook and notifications and all kinds of technical changes in my payroll system as well, programming changes. Do we sit and wait? Or are we talking about this is going to be months? It's going to go on delay? Any idea what we do now?
So the good news is I don't think it's going to be months and months. I think it might be a month. It might be a couple months. And the reason why it won't go on and on is because it was filed directly with the Missouri Supreme Court. And so I think the Missouri Supreme Court will address it very quickly. Of course, the minimum wage goes into effect on January 1. And so that could mean that the Missouri Supreme Court gets to it immediately, or at least issues some sort of a preliminary ruling here to give employers guidance. Until the Supreme Court issues some sort of a ruling, everyone should prepare for this to go into effect. People should be preparing right now for the minimum wage to go into effect on January 1. And then, of course, we have until May to actually implement the paid sick leave law I think we'll know something well before May on where this law stands.
Yeah. You know, just anecdotally, things that I'm hearing from individuals is people voted for the minimum wage increase. They were not voting for the paid sick time. It
Right.
was in their minds. There was two different things that they were thinking about when they voted. I'm not saying I represent a large group of opinions in that. I'm just saying those are anecdotal statements that people shared with me. That, oh, I didn't realize the sick time was like this. You know, and maybe it kind of was hidden and buried, which is a traditional political style, right?
Of course.
Bury things. All right, what else you got there, Burt?
All right, so I want to talk about another absolutely huge development that took place yesterday. And Nick, I sent you a slide, if you don't mind putting that one up for our listeners, viewers. Phil, you and I have been talking for quite a while. I know when we did a presentation probably about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, on what to expect, what might happen pre-election. So we talked about it pre-election, what you could expect maybe out of a Trump administration or out of a Harris administration. I spoke about a week ago at my firm's quarterly breakfast briefing on what to expect under a new Trump administration. And one of the most interesting things is the NLRB the National Labor Relations Board has been the most activist NLRB that we've seen in the history of the NLRB in its 80 years. And this is not unusual from one administration to another, that because of the way the terms of the board members are staggered, that a incoming president does not necessarily get control of the NLRB at the beginning of his administration. And so what you see on the screen here is a reflection of the staggered terms. And this is your NLRB as it exists today on December 12th, 2024. You have 3 Democrat seats at the NLRB, 3 Democrat board members. There's an empty Republican seat, and then there's 1 Republican member right now. Again, even having 3-1 is not necessarily unusual for the NLRB. There's a Republican who will be nominated for that 3rd seat, or for that missing seat. And this was probably going to take place under the Trump administration anyway. And so I want to point out that Chair Lauren McFerran, her term is set to expire December 16th, in just a few days here. And she had been renominated by President Biden, and people really were expecting her to get reconfirmed, and that she would be on the NLRB. Then it would not be until August 27, 2026, when David Prouty's term expired, that Trump would get control of the NLRB. So like about a little over a year and a half into Trump's presidency, he would not have control of the NLRB. Well, yesterday, Chuck Schumer called Lauren McFerran's nomination to the floor, and to the Senate floor, for confirmation. And Senators Sinema and Manchin both voted against McFerran, and her nomination failed. And so what this means is that Trump is going to get control of the NLRB very, very early into his presidency. I think he's going to nominate 2 new board members immediately upon his inauguration. And I think that they will sail through. I think they'll make it. And you're going to have a Trump NLRB that's going to be 3-1 in favor of the Republicans for a short period of time. And then it's going to be 3-2 thereafter. And so Trump will have control of the NLRB throughout his entire next term.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. It doesn't happen, like you said, very often.
Yeah, very, very, very unusual that he's going to get control of his board from almost day one. And this is going to affect everything from election rules, the new rule that basically the employer has to file the petition. It's going to affect non-compete, trade secret agreements, confidentiality, non-solicitation agreements. It's going to affect everything all over the board for both union and non-union employers. It is a hugely, hugely significant development, and really does mark a failure for this last administration and the current administration, and for Schumer personally.
Yeah. All right, Burt, we got one more minute. What else do you have for us?
All right, and I'll just mention it really quickly, Phil, because I told you we've really been focusing a lot on this case of the city Muldrow versus the city of St. Louis, where the U.S. Supreme Court sort of lessened the standard for what constitutes an adverse employment action to an employee. And, you know, it takes time for the Supreme Court decision to be interpreted now by the lower courts. And I'm just going to mention that the lower courts and the courts of appeals are struggling to really figure out what constitutes an adverse employment action for an employee. And we'll talk about it in more detail on an upcoming show. But I will tell you that they're starting to develop a split among the circuits as to what type of adverse action satisfies for an employee to be able to state a claim against the employer. Are things like simply a reassignment to administrative tasks, adverse employment actions, is it unfavorable shift, an adverse employment action, or does it need to be something more? The courts are struggling with this, and in the meantime, we're starting to see a swell of cases being filed against employers, challenging even the most sort of nondescript type of adverse actions. One thing I will mention real quickly is that we're seeing some cases out there develop where simply denying an accommodation in an ADA setting, that in and of itself is an adverse employment action, which may trigger an analysis under Muldrow. So we'll talk about it on an upcoming show.
Yep. Well, that's a little bit of a teaser. Stay with us and we'll bring it back to you in 2025. There you go. Yeah. All right.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.